So Pitocin is actually a synthetic drug which imitates the action of oxytocin. And oxytocin is a natural hormone that we release when we have an orgasm, when we cuddle our children, when we are in any type of loving situation. It's basically the love hormone, and it's magical. And it is responsible for the contractions of our uterus. It is responsible for actually pushing our babies out. And so Pitocin was a drug that was discovered that could imitate the action of oxytocin. And what's funny is when it was actually created, the doctor who created actually wrote, well, now that we have the control over something feminine that we otherwise had no control on, well, we can start having control over childbirth. Childbirth being an all-important task for humanity that men had no control over, and that was a problem. And so when he created Pitocin, he actually said that there was no medical reason as to why we should be using it. However, how grand that we could now take over control over something that only women had control over. So that was the whole reason that they kept it. And there was a doctor that was working on this, drug and the creation of it. And the first thing he said is, we should not be using this drug unless we absolutely, absolutely need to, because it is dangerous. It does not work as well as oxytocin. It is way too strong. The contractions are irregular. They have no direction to it. It's basically tying a brick to a gas pedal in a car and removing the steering wheel. It just drives and drives and drives and drives, but it's not connected to your brain, which is receiving messages from your pelvis to tell you where the baby is actually positioned. And so it's not pushing contractions in a logical way in order to get your baby out. It's just pushing like this. So it's basically just a brick on a gas pedal. And so we should only be using it in case of an emergency. And the contractions obviously are much more painful, which leads to a lot of women to end up taking an epidural because it's just too much. And then from then on comes this whole cascade that we could talk hours and hours about. But when you start doing, one medical procedure, the next thing you know, you're drawn into this huge cascade of medical interventions that will often, unfortunately, lead to cesarean sections, episiotomies, the use of vacuum, the use of forceps, a baby that's not doing well at birth because those contractions are so hard and pushing the baby against, surfaces that he shouldn't even be touching on. And so the baby may, exhibit distress while you're in labor, etc. And so we have no choice but to do a cesarean section. Well, the baby wouldn't have been in distress if we hadn't given Pitocin. And beyond that, not only do we use Pitocin to play God and to induce labors, but now in approximately 75% of births in Canada, at some point we give Pitocin because we're so damn impatient that we have decided that if a mother does not dilate at a minimum of 1 centimeter per hour, then we give Pitocin to make that go faster, because God forbid that she give birth at 3 a.m. God forbid that it takes 12 hours instead of 6 hours. Which moms are like, oh, yay, 6 hours, way better than 12. Well, no. 12 hours on regular oxytocin contractions, doable. 6 hours on Pitocin contractions, not so great. It's a lot stronger. It's a lot more painful. It's a lot more intense. You go from 0 to like 100 in no time. You have no time to adjust. There are no breaks, because in natural labor, when at certain points in your labor, especially when you actually hit 10 centimeters, there's usually a break to allow you to rest before the next part of your labor. Whereas with Pitocin, as soon as your contractions start slowing down, they just ramp up. They just ramp up the dose to make sure you don't have a chance to actually rest. So that's a little bit of my my spiel about inductions.
Thank you so much, Sam. And I actually did not know that the reason that Pitocin was invented was specifically to control women. I mean, I always had that feeling, and I thought about that even when I was reading Millie Hill's book, Give Birth Like a Feminist, but that didn't actually click in until you said it. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's exactly why they did that.
I think if I remember well, it was actually discovered by accident. And one of the doctors who discovered it warned against using it because he realized that it could be useful at some points, sometimes, but it had severe side effects. And so we had to be very, very careful. But then another doctor saw the other opportunity of, this lifelong battle that humanity has had with women having control over something so huge and so monumental for our society.
Oh, yes. God forbid women actually have power over ourselves, right?
I mean, how can we leave such an important task to women?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, our silly little brains can't possibly handle it.
I know.